What's going on, fellow A-plussers? It is I, your host, as always, Adam Perez, back once again with a brand new video review for you guys today as we're finally getting into The Flash. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. The Flash has officially dropped as of this weekend. Ezra Miller returning as Barry Allen in his, I would say, his own solo film, but this was definitely very much a worlds collide sort of movie where we have a little bit of a crossover event, if you will, with a lot of other great superheroes. Michael Keaton certainly returning as Batman, along with Sasha Kaye making her debut as Supergirl also. Had the opportunity to finally check out this film yesterday evening. Went to go ahead and check it out in IMAX. They give away this amazing IMAX poster, which I was a really big fan of, getting an opportunity to see all three superheroes, or at least the Batwing mostly in here, but the Flash somewhere, and also Supergirl also. But I had to go pick one up before I walked out of the theater. I picked that up from AMC. If you guys have not had the opportunity to check out The Flash, please go ahead and certainly do so, guys, this weekend. Let's talk about this movie, man. Look, this is, in fact, a spoiler review. So if you have had the opportunity to talk or see The Flash, it is time, in fact, to go ahead and talk about it. I know a lot of people also certainly have not seen it. So come back to this video when you have checked out The Flash, because we're going to be going through it all, ladies and gentlemen, the pros, the cons, the in between, and of course grading this particular movie for you guys. So yeah, at the end of the day, again, just remember, these are simply my A+ opinions. I always want to know yours, so let your thoughts be known in the comment section box below. As I'm going through this review, if you have any thoughts you want to share, feel free to go ahead and let me know your thoughts in the comment section or the live chat here, guys, since we are in fact doing this live today. So I definitely want to go ahead and get your guys' thoughts and discussions. But let's go ahead and talk about this movie. I'm debating whether or not I want to talk about the good or the bad. So let me just say, first and foremost, this is not the best comic book movie of all time. Unfortunately, what James Gunn and maybe some of the other big head honchos have certainly have told you after some of the screen testings, maybe first reactions, this is not the best comic book movie of all time. I'll just say that right now. I am usually pretty fair-minded, pretty level-headed in regards to how I certainly talk about my movies and my reviews. I like to certainly give every movie certainly its fair shake, but they definitely overhyped the hell out of this particular movie. Now, listen, if you've seen this movie and you've enjoyed this movie and you absolutely love it and it's through the roof for you, props to you. I'm really excited that you guys had the opportunity to really enjoy this movie. For me, I just enjoyed it. I just enjoyed it. I enjoyed it, but definitely it had its flaws. An enjoyable movie, but certainly could use improvements, if you will. So I'm definitely not going to boast to high heavens about this movie. But again, I'm not here to crap on your yum. If you were a big fan of this movie, I'm really thrilled for you. I'm really glad that you guys were able to enjoy it as much as you certainly did. For me, I walked out of this movie theater thinking to myself, okay, it was a good movie. It was a good movie. So let's talk real quick about the good, because while I did enjoy it, I do think it certainly deserves to have some praise in certainly some areas. So for me, the performances, I really enjoyed the performances. I thought Ezra Miller, especially at times when it comes to a lot of the emotional scenes that we wind up having in here, along with the really trying to figure things out about what happened in regards to the timeline, how to get back home, how to fix it, sort of thing. When he's really sitting down and focused, especially with somebody like a Michael Keaton, or he's opposite somebody like a Sasha Kaye, or even opposite himself sometimes when he finds himself in these really weird predicaments, I do think that he does come across with a really good performance. So that definitely, I don't want to say surprised me, because I have always been a fan of Ezra Miller as Barry Allen, but very much in small doses is what I've come to find out. The idea of Barry Allen sort of as a lead for me in a movie, that I don't necessarily know if I'm cool with, because there were certainly a lot of times of obnoxiousness in this movie for me when it comes to just his character. And so while I love it in small doses, to have it around for 2.5 hours as the main lead sometimes can be a little bit too much. But aside from that, I thought Ezra Miller did a really good job in portraying Barry Allen in here. Keaton definitely certainly comes through along with Sasha Kaye. So I am glad to see those two with some really strong performances in here. But this movie always felt like I needed a little bit more. You know, it's pretty funny that I say that, though, because I think Andy Muschietti, as of yesterday or today, today might have mentioned the idea that there is like a 4 hour cut of the Flash movie. But then he clearly had to dwindle that down to the 2.5 hour movie that we wind up getting. And honestly, there's a part of me that kind of wants to see the 4 hours. Like, I kind of want to see if there's more context to this movie. That certainly felt like maybe it needed to be there for some characters like a Michael Keaton and a Sasha Kaye as Supergirl. So strong performances, I thought, all around from especially our main three when it comes to Barry Allen, Bruce Wayne, and Supergirl in here. As far as the definitely this movie definitely pulled at the heartstrings. I thought the story was relatively pretty good. The idea of seeing what it is that Barry's trying to do in regards to save his mother, I thought that was always pretty interesting, especially the moments when he actually does get to spend time on screen with her. Like towards the end, the heartbreak of him having to make that decision of putting that tomato can back up and letting his mother sort of pass away, always heart-wrenching. And again, I think Ezra Miller does do a really great job, especially in his performances when it comes to those type of moments in here. So I did think that the storyline definitely had the emotional punch that it certainly needed, honestly. So I was a big fan of that also. Some surprises in here too. I honestly wasn't expecting them to kill off Batman and Supergirl, and then have to be forced to kind of see it on repeat. That was honestly surprising and a little jarring, but I dug it. I honestly dug it, and I kind of appreciated seeing sort of the story kind of come full circle. I do think that this movie probably needed a little bit of a better villain, honestly, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. But for me to see his story kind of come full circle and realize that the true villain is technically himself, maybe not Barry, but his alternate, if you will, the idea of seeing him, not only hyped up about having superpowers, but like the idea of, you gave me these powers because you needed my help, because we wanted to save everybody. And the fact that he sort of takes that to the extreme, if you will, right? Clearly not having the same experiences as our Barry Allen. He really takes this new power to the head, to the point of just doing whatever he can to try and save not only his mother, but also, Batman and Supergirl especially. So it definitely felt like his powers definitely started sort of corrupting him and really put him in sort of like this paradox loop, where he's kind of stuck in this time force and continuing to try and save everybody. So I did find that pretty interesting, and even seeing the appearance of the villain towards the end was actually pretty startling. I thought it was a really cool costume design for this alternate Barry that we wind up having in here, honestly. So cool concept that he finds himself sort of as the main villain of here, but I still felt very much like it could have done a lot better with a more significant villain than that. Cool cameos in here, honestly. We wind up having George Clooney wind up popping up in this movie towards the end, which was relatively surprising. I honestly thought when we get to the end of this movie and they wind up walking out of the courtroom, I was expecting Michael Keaton to kind of step up out of the limo. I definitely felt like, yeah, this is certainly not Ben Affleck anymore whatsoever. So the fact that it was George Clooney, I was not expecting it. I definitely was expecting a Michael Keaton. So it does make me scratch my head a little bit in the sense of like, so does that mean George Clooney is our new DCU Batman? Like, is he back for like Brave and the Bold? Like, are we going that route? Like, what do we find ourselves in? So, and one of the things that I discovered today, I think the Hollywood Reporter wind up dropping an article on the inside of the Flash, how the ending of this movie literally had like 3 different rewrites. Because if you guys remember, this movie has gone through like 3 different regimes of management in its time. And so as each new person sort of kind of came and went, if you will, they definitely went ahead and sort of changed the ending of this movie to kind of fit whatever the future is going to hold for the DCU. So I am fascinated with the addition of George Clooney. We also wind up getting Christopher Reeves, along with, I think it was Linda Carter, that wind up playing Supergirl, like back in the day during the same time of Christopher Reeves, to kind of see them. Not Linda Carter, I'm thinking that's Wonder Woman. Damn it, I can't remember the Supergirl name. But anyway, seeing them both return was pretty fascinating. I did read an article that they did bring back that Supergirl to go ahead and film, if you will. The Nicolas Cage Superman I thought was pretty good. That's a little bit of a deep cut, though, like for fans that even knew that Nicolas Cage at one point in time was supposed to be a Superman. Like, I think if you do not know that story, or if you've never read or watched the documentary The Death of Superman Lives, What Happened, which is a documentary I highly recommend everybody certainly check out. It tells you the story of the Nicolas Cage Superman movie that almost was from Tim Burton. So the fact that they went ahead and included Nicolas Cage, for me, I thought was really, really cool. Like, I really appreciated them doing that. Even the big spider that he's got a battle straight from the script of the movie and things like that too. But it definitely went over a few people's head for sure in the movie theaters when I was watching this movie. Some people were chuckling like, what? Like, what the fuck? What is Nicolas Cage doing in this movie, sort of thing. So it definitely surprised them as well. I think we even got ourselves a Jay Garrick in here from the Black and White, unless that was like a old traditional Flash on television at some point in time. Who certainly knows? The movie does get a little bit confusing towards the end. Like, for me, instead of seeing all these Supermen, I really would have loved to have seen different iterations of the Flash over the years. John Wesley Shipp, Grant Gustin would have been nice, especially since you highlighted the Black and White Flash also. I think the idea of getting to have to see those worlds kind of colliding, considering the fact that it is a Flash movie, I think honestly would have really gone a long way. But certainly some surprising cameos that certainly got reactions out of the theater. But I do think that we probably could have utilized some other cameos that probably would have went a much further way for a character like the Flash. I thought the action sequences were pretty good in here. The car chase sequence between Batman, I thought in the beginning was actually pretty good, and then any of the other sort of action sequence we wind up getting towards the rest of this movie, I thought certainly worked out for me. So those were some of the things that I enjoyed about this movie. So again, strong performances. I really enjoyed the story in regards to the emotional arc that it winds up having, the journey that Ezra winds up certainly finding himself on. And if anything, along with the great cameos, I just wish that we wind up getting more of the supporting characters in here as well. As far as the bad, can we dive into the cons of this particular movie? For me, the first act of this movie was rough. It was really rough for me to get through, in the sense that it took me a while before I can actually get into the movie itself. It just surprisingly just did nothing for me the entire first act. To me, it didn't really kick off or become meaningful until Flash actually does dive into the Speed Force and manages to sort of go back in time, if you will. That for me is when this movie really starts to kind of pick up and dive into something that I'm really looking forward to. So for me, the beginning was really pretty rough. The CGI and the action sequence for the baby shower, if you will, I honestly could do without all of that. Some of the dialogue was a little bit cringe. It was just really hard to kind of get into the swing and the momentum of this movie when it winds up sort of beginning. Like, Alfred winds up calling the Flash for help, and the Flash literally says, like, you can't ask Superman, you can't ask Wonder Woman, right? Like, almost like the point the Flash is literally the last person to go ahead and help. And yet towards the end of the first act, Wonder Woman does pop up, besides the fact that she literally just ignored everybody's calls, and I guess she's just on her own schedule, right? I mean, I guess she just shows up whenever she certainly wants to. So you literally told us you couldn't get a hold of her, and then Wonder Woman winds up popping up to go ahead and save both Batman and Superman and the Flash from the situation they found themselves in. And then just to get into the cringy dialogue of Batman with the lasso of truth around his hand, along with the Flash admitting that he's a virgin, sort of thing. It's just like, it was just a weird start to the film, honestly, and it just felt like it took a while before this movie certainly had its legs under it. So definitely cringy dialogue. Rough beginning. I really didn't care so much for a lot of the supporting characters, like his co-workers. They seemed like a bunch of assholes and jerks. Even get an opportunity to see their alternate selves in the other world, where they're trying to figure out, what superheroes or what metahumans are there, right? Where's Aquaman? Where's Wonder Woman? When he's in the apartment and we talking to all the other roommates, sort of thing. It's just that dialogue just went on for just maybe a little bit way too long. So I definitely had my issues, at least with the first act of this movie, and certainly some questions questionable dialogue in here. I actually didn't even really care too much for the costume for Batman, at least for the cowl. It was just a really weird mask for Ben Affleck, and it just kind of came off a little bit creepy, to be perfectly honest with you. So the first act for me, I really couldn't do too much with it. And I mentioned at the top that while I appreciated Ezra Miller's performance, there are times that Barry can just be pretty and downright obnoxious. And now I have to deal sort of with two of them in this movie. And I tell people all the time, like, look, if you're not a fan of Barry Allen's personality, like if it gets to you, like if it's gotten to you before and say like the Justice League movies, and you just aren't a fan of Ezra Miller's version of Barry Allen, you might not like this movie very much, just because of the fact that now you got to deal with Ezra Miller twice. And look, I'm not talking anything in regards to his personal life. I'm just talking about the personality of Barry Allen itself. The idea that we have two obnoxious Barry Allens, but one Barry Allen at least does play it straight from time to time when he needs to get serious and have those deep conversations with the obnoxious alternate Barry, then I'm completely on board with it. But when it's just the two of them going back and forth and bickering and arguing, no, you lose me. You lose me then. But what I will say is, despite me feeling like that, there is a moment in this movie that made me sort of go, I get that that's the point, right? Because even Barry has had enough of himself. Like when he scolds his version of himself in the Batcave about this is why nobody likes you, yada yada yada. I'm like, man, it's almost like he's talking from my point of view. Like he knows exactly, like he knows how other people sort of view him, if you will, right? And so for me, the obnoxiousness all of a sudden just kind of makes sense, right? It definitely adds to who Barry Allen is, which thus in turn causes him to maybe not necessarily feel comfortable around people, or have that be that introvert, or have that social anxiety and social awkwardness, right? So I get that that is part of his personality. But even for me, sometimes it could definitely be a little bit too much. So the fact that Barry calls himself out for it, I'm like, at least he understands where I'm coming from, certainly as the viewer. But there are definitely times in this movie where it was maybe a little bit too much. But again, I did think that Ezra certainly delivered some pretty good performances when he's certainly performing opposite of himself. Not enough screen time for Keaton and Sasha Kaye, and I really wanted more in depth of the both of them. In the end, they almost felt more gimmicky to me than actually had a true meaning to the story. Like I appreciated Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne sort of breaking down, how the multiverse possibly works, and helping them get Supergirl out and during their battle sort of thing. But it did feel very much like a just like a gimmick. Like I think even Michael Shannon, who came back to reprise his role as Zod in a recent interview, talked about the idea that he didn't really care for his character, General Zod. It felt very much like they were just playing with action figures, is how he sort of put it. And when I watched this movie, it does sort of feel that way, especially towards the final act. Some cool moments visually on screen, but meaningful moments, that can definitely be a little bit more questionable for me. But I did appreciate seeing them on screen when they definitely were here. I definitely did not believe in the Iris West and Barry relationship. They had two really cringy moments together, right outside of the office building, right, where it's like, is she questioning Barry about her dad? Does she want to get a scoop? Is she really like care about him to ask him how he's doing? And then when she bumps into him at the apartment, cool scene between the two of them, but super short lived. And then the third time that we see her, she wants him to ask him out on the date. Like what? Like what reality am I in all of a sudden? Like, and they just did not have like any chemistry whatsoever on screen. Which is, I don't want to say is surprising to me, but clearly Barry has had a crush on Iris for the longest time. But I just did not believe their chemistry on screen at all, or even believed that Iris would want to have a date with Barry. Like this man literally has proven nothing to me to kind of show that these two should certainly be together or teasing a relationship between them. So just a weird Iris and Barry connection in this movie for me. And if I do have any questions, like as far as like cons, they just are a little some plot holes in here that I wish might have been filled out a little bit more. Like for instance, who does kill Barry's mom, right? I mean, I know the fact that you want to stop the murder from happening. So you think the idea of like, let me just put this tomato can in her cart and maybe that will, nobody has to go out to go shopping, right? Everybody stays home, stays safe, sort of thing. And maybe that definitely works. But then when you do take the can out, who who does kill your mom, right? Clearly you don't think it's your dad. Um, and you clearly didn't make it seem like you had proven that your father had survived. So when you do come back to present day and you look at the camera and the video footage actually shows his father's face because the tomato cans were now on the top shelf and not the bottom. Did Barry do that? Did he do that quickly before he left and we just didn't see it? Did they edit that out? Like, I have questions. Who moved the tomato cans and who killed Barry's mom? Granted, we all know who kills Barry's mom in the comic books, right? It's Reverse Flash. Why wasn't this man in the movie? I think even Andy Muschietti reveals that it's Reverse Flash when somebody interviews him. But it's just like, isn't that something that the Flash would want to do to like save his mom? Isn't that the point? Like if you're out there trying to save your mom, but you know she's still gonna die, don't you want to at least meet the person that killed your mom? Sort of mentality. So it just felt weird that that's the villain that they decided to go with, the paradoxical sort of version of himself instead of somebody like a Reverse Flash. I mean, you want to sit here and wait for this movie to have a sequel to give us a Reverse Flash? This movie may not even make enough money at the box office to even have a sequel, to be perfectly honest with you. Andy Muschietti is already off of this movie. He's going to be doing the new Batman movie. So he's like, I'm not even coming back for a Flash sequel whatsoever. So it does make me beg the question, like, what's the future hold for this character, right? How did the future change in this particular movie? I put, how did the future change with the soup can? Just luck, or did Barry do that? Reverse Flash, anybody? So it does make me wonder. Like again, George Clooney pops up at the end of this movie. Does that mean he's going to be our Batman in the DCU Batman Brave and the Bold? If I did have to make an assumption, right? If I did have to make a speculation about anything, I almost don't even know if this world will be the DCU because it feels like very much what I think Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne explained is that while they do have like points in time that are like events that are just stuck in place, if you go forward or backwards or change anything, you technically change like the whole timeline, right? So like or at least create another multiverse or another dimension. So it does make me wonder, even with Barry putting the can back in place and seemingly setting things up, he seemingly has also sort of clearly he's created a new timeline where George Clooney is now sort of our Bruce Wayne. So does that mean that technically the Flash has never gotten back to his particular world? Or like how much has changed? Like I just have so many questions, bro. Like I just have so many questions that a movie honestly like The Flash, especially when you're dealing with the Flashpoint, should really sort of figure things out for you. It's one of those things where it's just like, I wonder if this is a reason for two things, because we also get a post-credit scene or a mid-credit scene to this movie where Aquaman is like a drunkard, right? Like he comes out of this bar, he's fallen into puddles and he's just sleeping there, sort of thing, just completely drunk. And it just makes me think to myself, is that the same Arthur Curry that we've had from the first Aquaman movie? So clearly things have definitely changed in this world, but there's a part of me that doesn't think that Barry is technically back where he first originally started at. And I wonder if that is one of the reasons why Iris maybe acts differently in regards to wanting him to go on a date with her or ask her out. If that's why George Clooney is now our Bruce Wayne, and if that is why Aquaman is acting a little bit more differently than I certainly would expect him to from his DCEU Aquaman counterpart, if you will. So look, I don't know what the future is going to hold for The Flash or any sort of upcoming sequel, But again, I am speculating that I don't know if Ezra Miller's Barry Allen even made it back to where he was supposed to technically be. So I wonder if this sort of frees up somebody like a James Gunn and a Peter Safran to then, if they want to, really create a whole new Flash and really kind of dive into this new world that maybe the Flash is sort of created due to his Flashpoint. But maybe he didn't even make it back to this DCU that has now been established or something that's brand new, right? Maybe Ezra is kind of stuck in just a parallel or alternate dimension or something. I really don't know, because there just feels like there's so many plot holes certainly left to explain at the end of this movie. Because look, if George Clooney shows up as Brave and the Bold Batman, I'm gonna have some questions as to why we got ourselves such an old ass Batman this time around. It would make sense in regards to him having a son and discovering all this stuff, this long lost child that maybe he didn't have. But I think even George Clooney is a little bit too damn old to be reprising his role as Batman once again. So it does beg the question, where is Ezra Miller's Barry Allen? And is it even on the same world that James Gunn's DCU is all going to be taking a part of? That would definitely open up the floodgates to being able to create some things if you wanted to, bring back some characters. And if they really wanted to go ahead and recast Ezra Miller as the Flash, which despite everything that they've been saying, I'm still under the belief that they are going to keep their hands clean of Ezra Miller, say all the good things that they need to while this movie is certainly out. But once this movie is out and released and it jumps onto streaming, I personally do believe that Warner Brothers will certainly go a different direction with their Flash. I mean, Andy Muschietti could say all he wants to about, I can't see anybody else playing the Flash, right? Like, bro, you're not even coming back to do a Flash movie. So your opinion at this point don't even matter to me. And so again, I just think they're just saying all the right things to show their support for Ezra Miller. But I do think once this thing hits streaming services, I wouldn't be surprised if we get an announcement for a brand new Flash at some point in time. So we'll see, man. Again, look, if I had to grade this movie, okay, because look, I've been on Twitter. I've seen a bunch of people talking about this movie was fantastic. It was absolutely great. Look, I enjoyed the movie. I thought the movie was good, but this movie definitely needed some improvements. It definitely had its flaws. It certainly was far from perfect. I think the critic score right now on Rotten Tomatoes is about a 66 or something like that. Still technically fresh. The audience score I think is like the mid to high 80s, so it's about a B plus. For me though, honestly guys, I'm giving this movie a C. I'm going to give this movie a C. For me, that kind of goes into the realm of like a 7 out of 10, is what that kind of really sits for me. If anything, I would almost want to put an asterisk by that C. I'm bringing it in at about maybe like a 75% for this movie. If anything, maybe on a second viewing, I might appreciate it a little bit more. So that C might be able to get bumped up to like a C plus. So for me, good movie, good effort, enjoyable moments with some really great performances and emotional heartstrings certainly being pulled, some stellar action in here also. But at the end of the day, really rough first act for me personally. The soundtrack, unfortunately, is rather forgettable, with the exception of maybe the Batman score. Definitely needed more Michael Keaton and Sasha Calle as Supergirl to add a little bit more depth to them. I found sometimes the two Ezra Millers a little bit obnoxious, regardless of how I felt about Ezra Miller's pretty good performance overall in certain scenes for sure. And I just think this movie definitely needed a little bit more at the end of the day. So a lot of plot holes here or there, not believable relationships, honestly. So yeah, I'm definitely going to go ahead and probably stick with my C. So yeah, if anything, I am working on doing like a report card, A plus hero report here. I think we're going to be really diving into the use of report cards. And I think you guys all remember having to bring home a report card to mom and dad, right? I think if anything, we're probably going to start really rating these with 5 categories in mind. And those 5 categories really just sort of being writing, directing, editing, special effects, and acting. So, writing, I thought the story was there. It definitely could have been a little bit better if you ask me. Maybe a different villain, but I did appreciate how Ezra's story really kind of comes full circle for him in here. I do think Andy Muschietti does a pretty good job directing in here. So I really didn't have too many problems with his directing work whatsoever. I think if there is anything that does worry me, it's the idea that he is officially now the director of the Batman Brave and the Bold movie. And there's just nothing in this movie that makes me think he can do a really great Batman movie. So that definitely worries me a little bit in that regards. But I do think for this movie, I do think that he did pretty good directing wise. I think the editing probably could have been a little bit better. I think they probably maybe edited out some scenes that probably really added some much needed depth to this movie. So probably could have gone that way. Effects, CGI definitely needed a lot of work. It didn't really bother me so much towards the end. It's really the first act, and then there's just some moments of the costume for Barry that just doesn't work for me. Him in the Speed Force, I know it looks a little bit rough, but I think it's intended to look like that in the Speed Force. But outside of that, I didn't really care for it too much. And the acting was relatively strong in here. I thought everybody did a pretty good performance, to be perfectly honest with you guys. So yeah, good movie, but definitely had its flaws and certainly needs improvement. So I'm definitely going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. And for me, that averages out to about a C. So we're talking about maybe like a 75% here for this movie. So I feel like I'm very much in between critics, very much in between the audience when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes. Surprisingly, Cinema Score, if I'm not mistaken, graded this movie a B. And I will say this, compared to a lot of other films that I've seen them grade, they usually grade movies like an A plus. Cinema Score is one of those sites that, to me, is very believable because they they ask audiences just as they exit the movie, right? So as you're fresh off of checking out the movie, you fill out a survey, right? So this is very much what the audiences are thinking. And again, a lot of the times they do drop like an A plus, if you will. So a B definitely makes me feel like this movie was a little bit more lackluster for most audiences, and most people that certainly were in attendance enjoyed it because look, I mean, when's the last time you brought a B home from on a report card, right? But when I say a B, I do think when it comes to Cinema Score, because you're fresh out of the theater, you're probably at like your highest hype level for a particular movie and haven't really had the opportunity to sit down and think on it very much. So the idea of them coming out with like a B to me probably means maybe you're rocking like a B minus or a C plus there, when you really kind of sit back and think about it a little bit. But that's where I'm sitting at least as a C. But again, guys, at the end of the day, these are just simply my A plus opinions. At the end of the day, I always want to know yours though. What did you guys think of The Flash? Am I being a little bit too harsh on this movie? I try and feel like I had the opportunity to sit down. I talked about it yesterday with my friend Jonathan a little bit, had the opportunity to sit back, think upon it all day today, read other people's thoughts and comments about what they thought about the movie, sort of thing. I don't want to say it's fully divisive. I think we've definitely had more divisive films for sure. But I do think that the hype level for this movie was very high. I was certainly hyped for it for sure. When James Gunn comes out and says this is the best comic book movie of all time or that he's ever seen, sort of thing, definitely overhyping this particular movie. So if anything, go in there with low expectations just to simply see a movie, and you certainly might be surprised when you go ahead and check out The Flash. If anything, again, I do want to see this movie again to see if I enjoy it even more a second time around or if it still certainly hits. So that C could turn into a C plus in time, but I'll definitely keep you guys posted. But again, I definitely want to know your guys' thoughts in the comment section box below, and we'll see what the future of this movie holds. Again, I don't think Ezra Miller returns. I don't expect to see George Clooney again as Batman in Brave and the Bold. So I have no idea what world they sort of planted us back on with Ezra Miller's Barry Allen. But hopefully we'll certainly figure it all out. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below. But that will do it for me in regards to my Flash review. If anything, we do have an episode of A Plus Hero Report tomorrow. So maybe somebody asks a live viewer question. Maybe we talk about it in honorable mentions, but I'm pretty sure we will talk about The Flash at some point in time, probably with Stuart. I believe Stuart has seen the movie. Indy is not going to see The Flash. I believe he's boycotting it for his own personal reasons. So if anything, maybe me and Stuart will talk a little bit more about this movie tomorrow. So tune in Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central Time for another episode of A Plus Hero Report. But until then, guys, do me a big favor. As always, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and keep it A plus. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.